Hey guys, how you doing? Craig here from Bass Lessons Melbourne again, and for today's player profile video I'm joined by Jonathan Maron. Maron?
Maron?
Not Maron.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for coming around, man.
Yeah,
it's been great hanging out. And you're in town playing with Donny McCaslin. How's that been going?
It's been great. Yeah, jet lagged but happy to be here.
Yeah. So you guys played Sydney last night?
Played Sydney last night at the Basement, and it was a great show, and here we are. Yeah.
And who else is in that band?
So it's on this leg it's Zack Danzig on drums.
Okay.
And it's always Jason Lindner on synthesizers and piano.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's kind of his right hand man for.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah.
Sure.
Are pretty consistent.
Yeah. And like, have you been playing that gig for long, or I mean, have you done lots of stuff in that style before?
You mean like, I mean, that style, I guess, would be like sort of electric jazz with elements of improvisation and electronic music, and I mean, it's, I guess I have. I used to play with this trombonist named Josh Roseman, who, if you don't know, he's kind of incredible. And he used to lead these bands. He and I were in Groove Collective together.
Right.
And he would write all this insane music that we used to play. And in some strange way, this feels like an extension of that, or just like
the next evolution.
Yeah, I mean, just there's some connection, and I think that connection is also that it's kind of a New York thing too.
Sure.
Donnie's been in New York for a long time. I don't remember the original question that you asked me, but have I played this kind of music before? I've never played Donnie's music before, but I have. There's something about this that seems sort of familiar and comfortable.
And like you're saying, it seems to be kind of a New York sound. Would that be right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Donnie's got his very own specific take on it and a really, really clear personality. But there is kind of this collection of musicians, like Mark Guiliana, like.
I don't know if beat music is it, but kind of fall into that category, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, the music is super different. Mark's stuff is different, but then he brings so much of himself to Donnie's stuff. So it's all like there's all this cross pollination, and it's these sort of sounds, because there's so much room for improvisation. You have these personalities that become really present in other people's music. Yeah,
in a different way. Yeah. And Zack Danzig, you've played with him a fair bit before this setup, in different incarnations.
Yeah, I mean, my experiences with Zack have usually been, back in the 90s. There was Jojo Meyer had his like drum and bass party that they would do. And obviously Tim LaFave would play almost all the time, but occasionally I was in there too.
Cool.
And that was also with Zack. So there was sort of, I guess my relationship with those guys goes back to around that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so how old were you kind of when that was happening, and if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah.
In the 90s.
I mean, I'm trying to think. Was that like late 90s? So it was, late 20s.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And what was it like playing with Jojo in that scenario? I mean, that was kind of like his home turf, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, for me, it was really natural for me, because I was always I've always been interested in hip hop, in electronic music, in dance music, like more than jazz. That's kind of that's kind of my background. If I have a background, I mean, I've always loved that music. I've always loved messing around with pedals.
Like the sonics of it.
Yeah.
Is attractive. I'm
yeah,
guessing.
and Jojo used to come down to this club where I used to play, which was more of like an, I guess they would call it an acid jazz, like DJ night. and Jojo would come play. So he and we already had like a really clear hookup. I don't know. Yeah, it was a natural fit. Like what I do fits
what he does.
Fits there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, you see him. I was actually just watching a bunch of Nerve videos the other day, and it's really explosive as playing it can be. You know, I'm just wondering how you deal with that kind of scenario live on stage, because I know when you're in those improvisational elements that's not a jazz context, you know, there is a danger that everybody just ramps up, and it becomes a noise, especially with pedals and that kind of thing. So I guess what my question is like, going down the sonics and the pedals route, was that an avenue where you could maybe decide to play less but get more?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's, you know, there's a level of commitment, like making a really big statement, but knowing that you're going to have to commit to that for a while. Like,
yeah, sure.
For better or for worse, you're going to go in that direction. Like if you come in with a really, really big sound or play something that's a really, really clear theme, that it's the best thing for the music is to commit to that. And if it wasn't as good as you kind of like make it better as you go.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a kind of commitment. And as far as like, you know, when there's that much subdivision in the music, like JoJo's, like his pocket's phenomenal, and Zack's same thing. Like just like there is this tremendous amount of facility, but there's also like,
for sure.
Yeah.
As soon as they play a bar of time use, like
yeah, everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So there's enough subdivision there so that the bass's role can be a little, can longer phrases, longer notes.
Yeah. More
laying out.
Textural almost. Yeah. And this was kind of during Groove Collective times, yeah?
Yeah.
Were you bringing some of that stuff into the Groove Collective sound, or?
Yeah, we kind of, I mean, it was not the, Groove Collective was definitely experimenting also with just like tons of analog synths and pedals and
Yeah, and what do you think it was that drew you to that in the first place?
Which?
The pedals and the sounds and the bass, in terms of taking that role in the band as opposed to the upright kind of thing or whatever.
I mean, I think, well, for me, it's always just been about like having a certain kind of impact, and my aesthetic has always been kind of wanting the bass line just to come in and sound like, not like that bass player is really great, although it's nice if people say nice things about me, but just almost like the kind of reaction be like, yo, I love that record. Like it's a strong theme, and there's so many records where the sound of the bass is such an important part.
Sure.
Like if you take a super like bright new string bass and play some classic bass line off a record, if it, like, you know, the sound doesn't live with the right part doesn't. You can, you know what I'm saying.
The sound of the bass.
This is the sound of jet lag.
And the part that you're playing, they go hand in hand.
Yeah. So I mean, pedals like have been sort of my way to like get these parts to live. Like I have these parts and these like bass lines in my head that I want them to speak in a certain way and come in and have a certain impact. And sometimes it's about like a big scene change, like just, you know. And then interestingly enough, like the pedal stuff is great for live. When I've recorded with pedals, I find more and more that the thing I want to hear almost more than anything is a really perfect electric bass sound without any effects on it. And the effects I'm much more subtle with when I'm recording stuff. It's like you need much less and sometimes none. Whereas like live, you click on a pedal just to like get the
energy.
Yeah.
No, I think that's probably true, that in a live scenario, you can create energies in a different way than you would on a record.
Hey. How about that? I'm gonna turn that off.
Oh, good.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, like in the studio, the idea of creating energy, because it's in a more controlled environment, I guess, you can leave more of that to other instruments and other elements that are happening in the music, as opposed to taking on more of that yourself in a live setting, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And even sort of like in the way, but even bringing that back to the live stuff, like it's fun to it's fun to sort of get the adrenaline effect of like kicking on a bunch of crazy pedals, but I feel like I'm happiest when I'm doing sort of equal parts recording and playing live. I notice that I'm able to accomplish that much more economically live, because I'm being a little more restrained with that. Where if I'm doing all live stuff, then it's sometimes
just more and more and more kind of thing. Yeah, right. Interesting. And was there have there been bass players who have maybe influenced your sound and your tone that you've developed over the years, going from the pure tone to getting your first pedal? Was there some guys who you were like, that's the sound of the bass that I...
Yeah, I mean, Bootsy Collins is my hero. I mean, I saw, like, there are a couple shows that I saw in a short period of time that kind of changed the way I hear bass. And one of them was the Gap Band with this bass player, Robert Wilson, who passed a couple years ago.
They're funky. Yeah,
and just kind of super aggressive P bass playing, but just incredible.
Yeah.
And I had been playing an 80s Yamaha before, but that was sort of, after I heard him play, that's when I realized, like, I don't really ever want to hear the bridge pickup ever again.
Right.
Like, so that was probably early 90s I heard the Gap Band play. So that had a big impact on me. I was listening to, like, a lot of the Herbie Hancock stuff with Paul Jackson on it.
Yeah.
And at the time, that had a big impact on me. And then seeing Bootsy Collins play live was life-changing.
Yeah.
I can't really describe it. Like, it's just, I mean, you know what he sounds like.
Yeah, but unless you've experienced
But to be in the space and just there's this one, I don't know if it's like, there's a song called Rather Be With You, where it's like it's like his slow jam. It's kind of famous. Like he winds up like playing this like ridiculously face melting solo, but he's also laying out for long periods of time.
Yeah, right.
And the way that he sort of just laid out and just like barely touched the groove, and then he would just come in and play a little thing, but it would be so heavy and then he was out again for 16 bars. So just, I don't know.
Was that Bootsy's Rubber Band or
it was like some version of it. I mean, this is 90s, so it's
right. Okay.
It's, you know, maybe there was one or two of the original guys from...
I can't keep up.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so Bootsy and what was the guy from the Gap Band?
Robert Wilson.
Robert Wilson.
Yeah.
Cool. And you were playing bass at this point, I'm guessing?
Oh yeah, I mean this was I was already in Groove Collective.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Already doing stuff.
So going back then, how
even before that.
How did you first get into the bass and stuff? Beatles.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was that through your parents?
Yeah, my dad brought home Magical Mystery Tour.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, that didn't lead directly to the bass. That just sort of led to love of music and their music. And then a few years later, like when I was already playing saxophone and piano, for some reason my father brought home Romantic Warrior by Return to Forever.
Okay.
It's like a fusion record. But actually got there's some really great things on there. And Stanley Clarke is like, I love his playing.
Yeah.
And that really got in there too somehow.
That was exciting music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, Lenny White and Stanley Clarke together are just, it's bananas how good they are. And then the sort of stereotypical, you're in middle school and they say like, we need a bass player because we're starting the jazz band.
Yeah,
so,
right.
So I started playing, and I had a teacher who was like, I was 12, he was 16, and he became like my older brother, and he was taking me to shows. And
there you go. Yeah.
So at 12, like we saw Jocko play the Word of Mouth Big Band. We saw Return to Forever play.
And where is this? Where are you going?
New York.
In New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we were going to I saw Miles play with Darryl Jones and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was pretty. It's pretty amazing to see those things at that age.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably like the last generation to catch that, to be able to catch that.
Yeah. And then he himself, his name is Roland Wilson. He doesn't actually. He still plays, but I wish he would play more.
Yeah.
But he himself was like a surprisingly evolved player for being 16. Like he was already working out all this stuff, and so having kind of a front row seat, like just hanging with him, like, and just he was working out all this chordal stuff and all this really, just a really creative, really great musician. So yeah, that was a big influence too.
Yeah, cool. And I'm guessing, you know, when you see somebody like that with your instrument, that's kind of how you think it should be. So when you got into it, were you diving head first and just kind of bananas about the bass from day one?
Yeah, I mean, I've been obsessed from the beginning. Yeah. I mean, you too, I bet.
Yeah. I got on first base. You know, I had the blisters and,
like
I was saying in the car, you know, I'd screw things until I discovered what happened, for better or for worse. You know, I just got like, you know, like you do when you're a teenager, you get obsessed with football or whatever. You know, mine was definitely bass.
Yeah.
So then Groove Collective happened pretty early on. Yeah,
I mean, I think I was 20 or 21.
Yeah.
Definitely the youngest guy in the band. And I actually, it's funny, I had two groups around that time. There's a band called Repercussions and a band called Groove Collective. And like both bands got signed to Warner Brothers like when I was 21 or 22. And so like nice record deals, like going to the studio for months, like working on records, budgets, and I really, it's funny because then I was just like, this music business is not so hard. Like I mean, I had done like my fair amount of like small like gigs for no money, but not really. Like I had done no paying of any dues whatsoever. Like, so I kind of did that in reverse. But my first two experiences with bands are like both of the bands that I was in, like were on Warner Brothers. So I was like, oh, music is easy.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I've since learned otherwise. Yeah.
And so, like, how did you balance that, being on a major label with two bands at the same time?
It just
was it some of the same guys? And
it was some of the same rhythm section.
Okay.
In both bands.
Right.
You know, there was.
I guess that would make it easier. Going, hey, we've got a gig. Hey, we've got a gig.
Yeah.
And you're the only one that can't do both.
And Groove Collective was kind of the live. Groove Collective was always playing.
Yeah.
And the other band was sort of like writing songs and doing an occasional, like it was much more sort of studio based.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is Groove Collective still a thing?
You know, kind of. We haven't really been active lately. There's some talk that we'll get together and do something else.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of off doing their own thing. So
sure. It could be.
Yeah, I could say no or yes, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of no, kind of yes. I mean, everybody wants. It's like it's all family.
Sure.
Like, and I'm going to be seeing Barney McCall, who's in the band for a long time. I'm going to be seeing him tomorrow. Like,
yeah. Okay.
So it's like those are my brothers. We grew up together.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way I see it. So we always talk about doing stuff, but we also have all been doing our own thing, which is good too.
Yeah. And you were writing in Groove Collective, writing the songs and stuff. How do you feel like that side of you has changed?
You know, well, I think, you know, writing for me in the beginning would be that I was coming up with a bass line that was sort of catchy enough to be the basis of a song. And I still write from the bass plenty. I mean, that's still like, I love songs where the bass line is the whole song. Like that's, you know.
I mean, all songs should be
that. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So why haven't people figured this out yet?
They haven't gotten the memo. So I think my writing was really that, like, me with a bass in my hands in a rehearsal studio or even just improvising live, and that would be like, oh, that's a song, and then we'd like kind of take it from there. So that was sort of my writing in the beginning, and then, you know, since then I've
refined it.
Yeah, I mean, I have access to pen and paper and Sibelius and like
and Logic. You were talking about, you use Logic.
Yeah. So I write more than just bass lines.
Sure.
And actually I did then also, but there was 10 people in that band, so it was the most valuable thing for me was to plug in the bass, turn it up loud, and play something worth listening to.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you like myself, where you have like a hard drive full of like ideas and grooves and riffs and things that you just run out of names for?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you go back and revisit them and flesh them out, or is it in the moment, if it's not happening, you just kind of move on and document it?
Yeah, I don't. I do go back to them, but I've been really, really bad at finishing things and releasing them, which is why it's like I've reread like kind of interviews I've done where like I'm talking about like my upcoming album due out in fall of 2014,
nice.
Or like it's yeah, like I do write a lot, I do record myself a lot, I develop the stuff, and yet I've not crossed the finish line.
Resulted into a piece of art, so to speak.
I mean, really, the thing that works for me really well is being a creative part of a project where someone else ultimately is going to make sure it gets finished. Like I love
collaborating.
Yeah. I love collaborating where someone else is responsible for finishing it.
To bounce off ideas with as well.
Yeah, I'm also a lot freer when I'm working with somebody else. I'm a lot more inclined to be kind of my full creative self.
Yeah, right.
When I'm driving, like I get much more conservative, and I'm sort of pulling things back sometimes.
Interesting. You think it would be the other way around? You know.
Well, it's funny. It's like there's a real trust thing. It's like when I record for people at home. Like, do you do that where people send files back and forth?
Yeah.
If you're sort of on your own, I've gotten better with this. Actually, I've sort of tricked myself into being like fully creative and loose. But when I would record for people, when it's me at home, I would wind up being super conservative because I'm like, all right, well, it's just me like playing. Like I can't imagine what they're gonna like. So
you'll play what's
mellow
obvious.
verse, like a little more on the chorus, like a fill into the like it's so it's when you're in the studio with the person when you're recording with someone, you get immediate feedback, and it kind of gives you you can play a take and be like, I'm just going to play a ton of crazy shit and see what actually works, and that might be the performance or the basis of the idea at least.
Sure, yeah. But without that immediate feedback, it's hard to do
And as a writer and a player, I feel that too. Like when I'm with somebody else, that feedback allows me to be a lot looser and a lot. It's funny. I guess I'm in some ways less self-conscious. Like with a real person rather than with the imaginary person with a frowny face saying like you should never play like
Don't go above the seventh fret.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I also think as well, like the whole home recording and demoing thing, it's a form of practice. You're refining those skills of listening back, hearing yourself in relation to whatever else is going on, tone manipulation, and just finding the right baseline for whatever it is that you're trying to write to.
Yeah,
for me, that's a way of practicing being in a band without having the band around, I guess. So even if it hasn't resulted in an album, I'd say it's probably been a massive part of your development playing wise.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, at least there's a space where I go to develop these parts of my playing and writing that aren't necessarily ready to bring onto a stage. Like there's all this like there's lots of like strange things that I would work on in my house that it's not ready for to be part of someone else's song or to be part of something I'm writing. It's just so it's good to have those spaces available, like just
you're just exercising that part. And getting back to the tone thing, how do you think that your tone has changed over the years?
I think I do think it has changed. I think I've gotten some combination of technique and intention, and for a while I was experimenting with a lot of different basses, and I have a house full of like kooky like hollow bodies and short scale basses and different stuff like that, because that's kind of the neighborhood that I like the most for sounds, sort of like a dark sound with a certain amount of percsound on it.
Yeah, I saw a video of you playing like an old Gibson.
Oh yeah, I've got that in that gig bag.
Oh,
in there.
cool.
Yeah.
The red thing.
Yeah.
That's 100%.
Yeah. You got to check it out.
Yeah, we'll get out before you go.
But it's funny. So I've experimented with a lot of different stuff, and I would do lots of stuff where I bring 5 basses to, if I'm recording something, to have all these options. And I think that's really informed my playing and my approach. And now I feel like for the most part I can sort of channel those sounds and approaches on like one P bass. It's nice to plug in a Gibson style bass and just get that sound, have that done. But I feel like playing all those different kinds of instruments has kind of informed my technique to the point where I can kind of channel it.
Sure, like kind of try and pull it onto the one instrument kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, my sound has definitely changed. I don't know. I don't know exactly where I'm going, but I know that things are evolving. Like that's been kind of a cool. I think that's probably the thing I'm proudest of, is I know that I'm a very different bass player than I was 25 years ago or 20 years ago or 15. Like I know it's heading somewhere.
That's cool.
Yeah. I don't know, and I think it's someplace good. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, there's,
I don't think you'll ever know, and you'll never get there. Yeah. Or you'll get there, but you won't realize it, and you'll just keep going, right?
Yeah. But it's funny. It's like it took a lot for me to realize that, like the things that I'm practicing are not going to find their way into my playing that night. Like it's good to you're playing something challenging. Of course, you practice it and you get better and stuff. But there's a much longer arc where the things you're working on or the concept you're considering, it's like they find their way in and they're integrated when they're ready to be. Sure. And it's like it takes a lot of patience and security, which are two kind of newer traits for me. Yeah.
Because you kind of, when you start learning, you kind of get this curve and then you kind of plateau out, and it's that kind of steady increase as opposed to spikes. Yeah, I guess. And was this one of your first basses? What did you get when you started out playing? I bought myself a Hondo P bass copy when I was 12, and then I had an Area Pro, which is the same. It's kind of the same model that John Taylor and Duran Duran had. The soap bars? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Not that I was a super fan of Duran Duran. It just happened to be that it's okay.
bass. Yeah.
If you were, it's okay.
I will say. Actually, I came to appreciate them after. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not. Oh.
Right. I didn't get that.
It's okay. Sorry, I wasn't talking to you.
Oh wow. Nice. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, because my wife actually has she knows every song in the 80s.
Every song in the 80s.
Basically, she does actually. Like Ready for the World had a second album, and she knows the singles and the lyrics, and she knows the third verses of those songs that were only released in Europe. Or I don't know. She knows all that stuff.
So you guys are both music geeks in your own relative field.
Yes. Yeah. I've only recently started to listen to lyrics, which is hilarious to her because she's all about the story.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I found that I've always been drawn to instrumental music, and started off listening to heavy metal, where the vocals was pretty much another instrument. You can really figure out what they're saying. You just make up your own version of it. And so, like the idea that 90% of the music enjoying population, the singer and the lyrics are what they hear first. I mean, I know that now, and you get into it, but it's still not usually my first port of call when I'm listening to something. It's usually the music first, and then I'll kind of check out the vocals, and it's I don't know if that's maybe a hindrance or not.
Well, I wonder. I mean, as with all things, it's both. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine. It's interesting. Is I think one of the things that really draws me to music is that's one of the places I can go where, like, I don't know, where language is not so important. Actually, there's something about, it's great to be articulate and to be able to put your feelings and thoughts into words, but it's kind of, it's been important to me to have a space that's not language. Yeah. And even to the point where, if you're on stage with someone where the singers actually part of their thing is kind of calling out things to the band, I have to make an effort to kind of someone is actually saying lay out or whatever, whatever it is. I'm not always receiving on that frequency. Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, whatever, that's the coffee too, but you can tell Yeah, I can talk.
Hey, that's the whole point
Yeah.
of this thing. So
Yeah.
you're in the right environment
Yeah.
for this, at least.
Yeah. So music it's great because that's where I can shut the hell up.
Any other kind of bass influences that you would say you've had, prior to seeing Bootsy and Get Band? We were talking about Jamerson in the car on the way over. Was that later on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that my love of Verdine White and Anthony Jackson led me to James Jamerson. Like, I can't.
That's a cool lineage.
Yeah, I mean, because I had Shaka Khan records with Anthony Jackson on them.
Yeah, right.
So,
Clouds and stuff.
Yeah, which one?
Clouds.
Clouds. Yeah, I wasn't hip enough to have that one. I had like some of the later stuff.
Sure.
But I do know Clouds, which is unbelievable. But so I would read Anthony Jackson interviews, and he would be talking about James Jamerson. So, and at the time I was, I would listen to Motown and be like, yeah. It just didn't really appeal to me.
Sound like old time pop music.
Yeah, yeah. So I got to Jamerson later. I think I was into late '80s, whenever sampling and hip hop started. That's when I started to hear old R&B and funk records through samples, and then I started to hunt down what the samples were.
Okay. Right.
So I think that's, you hear a bass line sample, then you're like, what's that? And then you wind up going to buy an entire record by Slave, or I didn't know about James Brown before hip hop, really.
Yeah, right.
So it's sort of backwards, and I definitely didn't know about Jamerson until Anthony Jackson would talk about him in interviews. And even then, like, I sort of didn't get it until I got it, and now I got it. Like, I mean, that was huge. And yeah, I mean, I feel like Verdine is in there too. There's something about some of like I'm trying to think. I guess Verdine is kind of like in the Jamerson lineage too. I loved Earth, Wind and Fire. Yeah, there's some like the way he approaches notes and stuff that's got that.
There's definitely that weaving the path.
Between
the chords kind of thing, but with a funk attack going on.
So I think that's how I got to Jamerson.
And Verdine, was he a Yamaha guy?
He had a lot. I think he did have a Yamaha. Yeah. I think he did. He had one of these at one point.
Yeah, I think so. I remember the kind of elliptical fret markers and stuff. I had this video, like one of those all-star bass licks kind of thing.
Yeah.
And had Verdine White on it, and Larry Graham on it, and Byron Miller.
I think I just saw some of that on YouTube.
Yeah, it just popped up the other day.
Yeah.
Everybody's got hair like this.
Yeah.
Like super 80s.
I think he might have been playing a PV or something. He had there were some kooky basses on that video. I saw that.
Just in case he dropped him when he was like 100 feet up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you pretty much been in New York whole life?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in. I was born in Brooklyn. Grew up in a town called Englewood, New Jersey, which is kind of was an amazing place for music. There was a lot of jazz musicians settled there. Like, rather than living in the city, they would, they were like, like famous, like Dizzy Gillespie and George Benson lived in Englewood. Not that I knew them or hung out with them or anything, but I mean, like,
hey George,
they were
go get your groceries and stuff.
Yeah. I think I saw Dizzy on his bicycle once, or maybe I think somebody else did and told me about it, but I've claimed that as my own experience.
That's cool.
But it was definitely that there was a lot of music in Englewood, and the other musicians in the high school and middle school were really, really good. And there's still certain sort of musical moments and sounds that I'm still sort of trying to. They're like these that I still sort of reach for.
Right.
I just remember from like these amazing singers and musicians, and that teacher of mine, that Roland Wilson. Like, we were just in the band room all the time jamming, and I was the youngest. Like, I was in middle school, and Roland was just like, "Yeah, man, come to the band room," and I would just check all these guys out playing, and it was, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the question was, have I been in New York? Like,
been in New York?
Yeah, within a 10-mile radius. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, so obviously New York's changed a lot over those years. What's kind of been? Is there a period where you felt that it was really developmental for you? Like you started to really grow in that scene?
Started to grow in New York?
Yeah, like was there a time in New York where you were kind of like, 4 gigs a night kind of thing, running around crazy? Or
well, Groove Collective had this kind of magical beginning, sort of like what I was saying about the getting signed at age 23 or whatever it was. So that band started, and because we were working with this club called Giant Step, which was a very big New York thing, and they still do stuff. Like our first gigs were mobbed. Like we didn't really exist, but because they were already the club that we were working with, they were also promoters. So our very, very first gigs were packed. Like, so
that's nice.
we had a really charmed beginning. Like we just would show up at a club, and then we built an audience. So we were playing bigger and bigger clubs. So it was this thing that it's not that I took it for granted, but I didn't realize till later, like,
you didn't really know any difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it. I wasn't like jaded.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, and it was amazing. But that was a time in New York that was really magical for me, and it was. We would just have these gigs, these spaces that were just full of people. We wouldn't start playing until 1 a.m. We'd be improvising for a lot of it. That's kind of what I was saying about like me writing as a bass player. Like, so I'm coming up with a bass line that's about to be the basis for a whole song.
Right. Yeah.
So
committing and on
so
the spot.
that was kind of where. That's. I mean, I don't. That's. I don't know. That's a big part of kind of how I approach things. So that was a magical time in New York for me, and I think New York is still a magical place. But it's in some ways it's somebody else's New York now, or like that.
Yeah, right.
I live in the Bronx now, which is like, so I'm not like in sort of
Close
in the
to
center
downtown.
in the same way, and I'm older. I hate to say it, but it's like it's somebody else's.
I mean, would you really be into starting a gig at 1 o'clock in the morning and improvising for 3 hours now?
I would be into doing it. I'd suffer the next day when my son wakes me up at 7 a.m.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely like, it's just different for me.
Sure.
But I'm amazed by how much creative music there is in New York. I'm amazed by the level of the musicianship still.
Yeah. I mean, I went there for 10 days once, and in that period of time I saw like Dave Weckl and Mike Stern and Richard Bona and Joe Beasley, Will Lee. Just in the space of 10 days I saw just all these kind of musical heroes, and they were playing like 55 Bar and Blue Note and Village Vanguard and stuff, and these clubs that you've heard about and are iconic. And then when you go there, it's like 4 times the size of this room. Like it's not. Yeah. If you're not from there, it's not what you expect. And these guys are kind of like, that's their local gig. Be like, we've all got kind of local gigs. They're kind of like, it's the norm for them to play with these guys and play that kind of music. And I think that's what's kind of unique about New York, is that you have these kinds of players playing week in, week out. And it's a normal thing, whereas Melbourne, we've got an amazing music scene and great players, but we don't have that. We don't have the names. Not that it's all about being famous or whatever, but like it's good to be able to check out a guy on a record and then go and see him on a Friday night and experience it for real and absorb that. I think that's maybe what just keeps New York special, is it just keeps feeding itself like that.
And then it's funny. It's both getting to see people who are your heroes, but also it sort of demystifies it a little bit, because you see that like, oh, that's Anthony Jackson getting a ginger ale at the bar after the set. Like you're like he both blows my mind and is a dude who's like,
and he gets paid his $125 in cash.
I mean, it's kind of
keeping it real.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's musicians always will. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I was going to say musicians. What we always want to play music. which sometimes makes us bad negotiators because our first thing is just like, I want to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like I want, you want to have the experience.
Do you want to play or do you not want to play?
Yeah.
You don't want to be the guy that doesn't play because you wanted an extra $20, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, if again it's an experience you want to have, I guess that's where you would be picky. Is you're like, is this a worthwhile thing? And then it's like, hopefully you're able to make decisions that aren't money based. I don't know how we went down this thing. Anthony Jackson and ginger ale. I don't know if he likes ginger ale. I know he likes James Jamerson. Yeah.
James Jamerson and Jimmy and ginger ale.
Yeah.
And do you get out much in New York these days to check stuff out? Not as much.
I'm grateful for the nights when I'm out because I have to be, and then I incidentally hear something that blows my mind. Like I do go out to hear music sometimes.
Unless it's like a special, you got to check it out kind of thing. But you're not just going to go and hang out.
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not tons. I mean, I've always been. It's funny. I'm sort of a homebody in a way. Like maybe it's a Gemini thing. Like I'm simultaneously really social and really introverted.
Bass player thing.
Is that true?
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to be part of it.
Yeah.
But we don't want to be the spotlight.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And similarly, like I love the adventures of touring and traveling and sort of all the weird experiences you can have just being in different places.
Going back to the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But left to my own devices, I don't plan like crazy vacations for myself where I'm,
Because music takes care of all that, really.
It's true. But it's funny how I'm both an experienced traveler, but I also like I don't do those things for myself. It's
no, I think I get what you mean. Yeah.
I might not be making sense, but
close enough.
But I might be
close enough for jazz.
Yeah.
So we should probably talk about the Maxwell album because I'm guessing that was a pretty big turning point in your career. He was part of Groove Collective. Is that right? No.
So Ital Shur was the original keyboard player in Groove Collective. We started the band together, along with 8 other people. And so he, besides being a keyboard player in a band in New York, he was already writing with people and doing things. And Maxwell was one of the people he was writing with.
So kind of going down the producer road a little bit already.
Yeah, and he wrote that song "Smooth" for Santana.
Wow.
So that's kind of like that's
his pension.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was gonna say that's the direction he chose, but yeah, it's also his pension.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
For sure. But yeah, so he and Maxwell had been writing together. There's this other. And Maxwell was kind of on the scene back then. He was really young. He was already seemed to be super, super talented and super focused, super like very, very like clear in his vision. And so those guys had been writing together, and I came in to play that song, and it's the only song I played on that record. But yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Ascension. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that was. He'd written the bass line, and then you just made it your own kind of thing.
Yep.
Jammed around it. Can you play a bit?
No. Do you mind if I don't?
No, I wasn't being. Yeah.
I'll play for a solid hour for you after, but yeah, it's squeaky strings. It's just imagine.
What was it? What was the bass?
I think it was this one, or it was the black version of this one.
Black version.
So it's a BB3000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Front pickup.
I think so. Yeah, it might have been both back still. It might have been before I made the switch. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And so off the back of that, did it open up a bunch of doors or not?
It must
not kind
have
of immediately.
I think it's like, it must have. I can't think of anything specific that it did, but it's like it's a great story to tell. Like, if someone's just like, what's that guy who looks like he's 12? Like really, you're gonna hire him to play the bass? And then you're like, oh, play on the Maxwell's. Like, it's definitely
it's a bit of a ticket.
It reassures somebody that I might know what I'm doing, because I like
even yourself.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I was 25, I looked like I was 11. So it really, I was not 7 feet tall. I did not have dreads. I was not the guy.
When you hear the music, it doesn't quite balance up with the guy that laid down the fat bass line. But
yeah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. So you've had quite a lot of studio experience.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it in New York. Have you done some stuff out west in LA at all, or Nashville or anything? Those are the big
Neither.
hubs.
I don't think I've ever. I mean, I've been to both cities, but not recording.
Yeah. Was that through a producer or engineers that you knew in the studios?
Which, the recording that I do?
Yeah, the recording. Yeah.
I mean, it's just probably. I think it. You mean why I would get called to do things?
Yeah, like because it's one of those scenes that no matter where you are, it's kind of like it's really hard to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the just the social musical circles. It's the
he's involved in that project. You need a bass player. And
it's just the word of mouth thing, getting to know people.
Yeah, being known around town.
Yeah.
For what you do and doing it well, I guess. Yeah, cool. And you've played a little bit with Mark Guiliana.
Yeah.
Is that in his project or?
I have played in his project a bunch.
Okay.
At different times. Do you know Chris Morrissey? Do you know that name?
I don't know that name, no.
He's a New York bass player you would love.
Okay.
Yeah, he's really, really fantastic. So when he's not around doing Mark's beat music thing, I'll sneak in there and play a little bit.
I've definitely seen him play.
Yeah.
Quite a tall guy? No?
I don't think
average?
I think average, yeah. Is he tall? Is Chris tall? He's got a very tall vibe.
Yeah, sure.
He's a big presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I've played in Mark's project. Mark and I played together there's a Dave Douglas project that we did 2 records, and there's a thing called High Risk.
Trumpet player?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So I played a lot with Mark, and he's one of my favorite musicians.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I saw him playing, obviously not live, but just on kind of one of those new voices, new sounds, new approaches. Not completely, you can see some of the lineage, but just it definitely captures your attention. What's it like to play with somebody like that? Is it the same as playing with anybody else? It just ends up sounding different. You just apply the same things.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know how to put it into words. I sort of know him, and I know his personality, and I really value him, and like he plays things that make me smile and that surprise me, and also things that just feel really good, like just it's funny. It's hard to put it into words, but there's I know his sound. I know what it feels like to play music with him. I've definitely learned a lot about like he has a super precise time sense, and the way he's able to move phrases around. I'm sure. I'm not sure. I know that I've gotten a lot better and had to get a lot better at kind of being my own center.
Yeah, I was thinking about asking, because it's very. I used to find it was very easy when the drummer would suggest a new one or accent something. As a bass player, our role is to instinctively to go with that. If he goes, okay, this is one, I will just instinctively latch onto that. And I had a kind of regular jazz trio gig for a while, and the drummer was killer drummer, and he used to do that all the time because he knew that he'd mess with me.
Yeah.
And then he'd switch back and go this. So, yeah, I mean, how do you go about keeping that in a metronome and stuff? Do you kind of learn some of his language, and you can kind of hear what he's saying and go, oh, you know what that is?
Sometimes I must have. I mean, I've definitely gotten better at it, where I can kind of be myself in those situations, and kind of be more grounded, even when things are going on that are rhythmically unfamiliar to me. I think it has to do with really getting to know someone's clock. Like Mark's time is like he's on grid. If he's suggesting something new, it's within, like he's not off. It's just in a different place than you might expect.
Sure.
There's some drummers who it really breathes, so you have to get a sense of what someone's clock is in a way, and then you can kind of judge, like, was that a different subdivision, or was that like just a later beat, or was that, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, it takes a while to sort of.
Is he? It's hard to maybe phrase this, but like, is he aware of?
Yes.
The impact that that will have on the players around about him, and will he ever does he like help you out, if you know what I mean? Or is it just like, I'm just going to say what I'm going to say and you guys kind of join me at the end?
No, he's super interactive and he's a really supportive player
cool.
also. Yeah.
Because there's also guys who will just do it and not kind of, can be concerned about there's 3 or 4 other guys who got to try and fit in.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's without overstating things or like really marking the time, and like
Sure.
It's always going to be musical and sort of and his sound, but he's also super supportive and super interactive.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's sort of what you said, like from where I was, from musically, the first snare is 2 and the second snare is 4. Like,
What?
You know what I mean? It's like, so
Stop.
Yeah.
2 and 4?
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like so it's like a loud snare. It's like, that must be the 2. Like, I mean, I'm maybe more sophisticated than that, but not by a lot. Like, I'm definitely like that's.
Well, I mean, having roots in funk and soul and rock and R&B, I mean, you're drawn to that feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's only natural, I think. It was like the first time I started checking out any kind of Latin music. I got that book, Funkifying the Clave and stuff, and not playing on beat 1 just blew my mind.
And I think the real challenge is, and not, it's just people I've, not just people I've given lessons to, but my challenge too is to be comfortable enough to bring your normal relaxed time feel to challenging situations. Like, just because you're challenged doesn't mean like suddenly you're on the front of your chair, like playing on the edge of the beat.
Okay, yeah.
To show like I know where 1 is. Like, to still be like relaxed and like playing the long, like play longer phrases, still have a big sound.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times challenging situations bring out like my pointier sound and my less relaxed feel. If I'm not,
yeah, you're on
I don't
edge.
remember. Yeah, you gotta. It's a challenge to just still be yourself in challenging situations.
A great example of that I think would be Tim Lefebvre, who does that kind of no matter where he is. I mean, not that you feel challenged in a lot of situations, but yeah, he has that same feel in most things that he does, I think. Even in the Tedeschi's truck stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Do you have any advice, or maybe not necessarily advice, but kind of like trains of thought that maybe people can try in terms of tone and how important that is to the rest of the band and to how you play your instrument? Because I know in a lot of my students lately, we've been looking at some pieces, some Meshell Ndegeocello stuff, who I know you've been privy to up close, and how the articulation and the tone of that is, it's 50% of the feel of that groove, and playing the right note at the right time is only half of the story with a lot of that stuff, where the bass is, like what you're saying, the bass is such a big part of the song. You've got a beat and you've got the bass line, and then you've got a melody on the top, and that could pretty much be the song. So if you don't have the tone right for that, then you're only halfway there. Do you have any suggestions as to how to go around developing that? And then also, sorry, this is kind of a long question, but like we're chameleons, we have to fit into different musical situations, and this tone for that song doesn't necessarily work for that guy and that kind of thing. But just having that, being able to hear the thing and go, okay, I need to do this to fit in to that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think I think it's sort of, I think you sort of have to lead with kind of intention rather than trying to decode and like extract the data from a performance. Like, you have to, before, like I've had conversations with people who are just like, now how do you approach if you're going to play dead on the beat or slightly behind or like, like I feel like talking about it doesn't help as much as kind of listening a lot. And if there's something, this is the first part of the question. We were talking about how do you start to develop like a sound that'll have the impact you want.
Yeah.
And I feel like it has to do with really just like listening a lot and kind of letting it seep in, like spending more time than you would think just as a listener, and like really, really focusing, and then kind of leading with the trust that it made it in, and then when you're playing, just kind of, I don't know, it just starts to kind of seep in there.
Yeah.
The conversations that, like, I've had lots of conversations about this with people, and I'm not confident that a conversation has ever led to anything besides more conversations. But I do think like listening is it.
And maybe also,
and recording yourself.
Yeah, recording yourself and hearing that back in context, which again is listening.
Yeah, I mean, and then like the thing about recording yourself is even kind of tricking yourself into seeing yourself in the mirror and not realizing it's you, and getting a clear look at, like, maybe even just having it, I don't know if it would be having it on in the background or something, and hearing like what had impact and what didn't, and what's sitting right and what didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Just having that analytical ear, but and you build up that analytical ear. I think I'm trying to help out here by having that library of music that you've listened to enough.
Yeah.
So you've listened to all this music, so that when you listen to yourself, you have kind of all these reference points that you can go, okay, that was a bit of that, and that was a bit of this coming through.
But even beyond being
analytical,
like just to like true immersion, and really like just trying to receive what's coming through on an energetic level, or what the intention of it, or what the pulse is, like like I think there's just something that seeps in that's beyond, like, all right, this note goes here and that note goes there, and because there's this there's this bootleg, there's this Prince song called "Do Me Baby," and I think it's Andre Simone on bass, and there's I don't know, I can't really explain what it is, but there's this one bass pluck, and there's a placement of it, and I've listened to it a lot, and I'm like, in 10 years I'm gonna be able to put a note right there. Like, there's a spot, and I'm just like, I can't do it now. Like, I don't have that. My clock doesn't. I can't really. I don't know if it's a mix thing, but it's this bootleg of "Do Me Baby," where like Andre Simone plays the bass, and it's I can't play. I don't even know what key it's in or anything. But it's just like, bing. It's just this.
Just where it is.
It's really simple, but it's like the placement and the sound. It's just like it's the baddest thing of all time.
Yeah.
And even on the record with Prince playing the bass is it. But there's this one bootleg where it's like, but I've just listened to it a lot, and I'm like, it's coming in this direction. I don't know when, but
at the wrong time probably.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah.
You're like, yes.
Yeah.
What was it like being part of Meshell's thing?
It was great. I mean, I did not realize what a force she was until I was like in front of her amp while she was playing, and I was just like, oh God, that's like, because the records are amazing.
Yeah.
But when you're standing next to someone, you realize like that's a person making that sound. Like, it's not just like a cool record. Like, that's a human being. Like, I loved it, and I loved her. Like,
were you playing like second bass kind of thing, like the
David Dyson Robert? No, sorry, that's baseball. Yeah, I don't know enough about
What's
sports.
Baseball?
Yeah, I could ask the same question. Yes, I think David Dyson was in the band right before I was.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's exactly that.
Wow.
Like, where I would play bass for basically the whole show, and then she would play a couple of like super heroic things, and then I would play more bass. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great, and it's just, YouTube is amazing because you can not only see someone play, you can see the people who's playing you love. You can see them. You can see the body language, and that's another way of kind of really taking in the intention
playing
of
with
something.
intent.
Like you see what their body is doing when they're not playing. So you can. That's their clock. That's the
internalized.
Pulse. Yeah. You know, when you're just listening to the audio, you're like trying to reverse engineer and how does the person come to that? So being in the same space as her and being like, oh, like wow, that's how she's feeling that. Like that's, or like seeing like some concert of Verdine White and you see that he's dancing in double time, which is
he's feeling the 16th.
Yeah.
Maybe just watch it.
Oh yeah. I must be making all kinds of weird.
Smash that in.
I bet you heard me drinking water really well too. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll sample that.
Yeah, cool. but I think that was, it's cool because it's like, obviously I was a fan of hers. Like, how can you not be a fan of Meshell Ndegeocello? But because I played with her for a couple months, I got to spend more time with that music than I would have as a listener. Like, you know, you listen to something, you're like, great record, and then you move on to your day.
You immerse yourself in it.
Yeah, it's like I got to really know that music and spend time with those musicians. And the rest of the band was also at a really high level, and that was definitely educational.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Can we quick talk a little bit your pedals setup?
You mean the ones that aren't working?
The ones that aren't working,
Yeah.
make it, who knows why. But we don't necessarily talk about these exact ones. But what are you going for color wise when you're putting together a board or whatever? Like, what's your kind of go-to vibes?
I mean, I use a lot of reverb, so.
Have you always done that, or is that?
You know, I've done it in the studio. It's only recent where I've actually been sort of hunting down pedals that'll give me a really good spring reverb.
So like
sound.
when you're playing like a regular bass line, you'll have a bit of reverb on there?
Not often.
No, okay.
Yeah, more like when I'm if there's something I'm doing, like, you know, anything chordal or stuff. There's a lot of stuff on different things I've played on where there'll be a couple other parts that happen to be played on a bass, but they're not very bass parts.
Okay, gotcha.
Which I mean, I'd love to get credit for them. Like, oh, listen to that guy, he's playing 3 parts. But you wouldn't know they're bass, but like there are a couple other cool little like plucky parts or something that are kind of tucked in.
Okay.
So, you know, for a long time that would be through a guitar amp with the spring cranked.
Yep.
And more recently, like I just have made it part of my live thing. Because I think the effects stuff speaks better with a little verb on it. Like it just, and spring reverb, that's just my preference. Yeah. So I've always got that sort of ready to go. So especially if I'm playing a solo of any kind. Yeah. Like, or if there's any like fuzz, like I like to have the verb there.
Makes you feel a little bit less exposed, I guess, maybe?
You know, it's like, it's nice to, I mean, I sort of like to use it as part of the instrument. Like I like to end a note abruptly, but to have the, sort of have it
tail
continue on, yeah. So reverb I like. Octave pedals I've been using for a really, really long time. I still have kind of a, like in the studio, I probably always will go for a keyboard bass thing. But I've been using the sort of sub-octave only thing for a long time, and that's kind of one of those live adrenaline thing, but in the studio,
not quite,
not always. Sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was OC2. I was using that for years and years, and I think I kind of wore out the sound in my brain. I loved it. I mean, I just was playing through yours. I love the sound of it, but I'm really enjoying this Mutron pedal because it's just got something different, and it's got this little weird kind of ring mod top thing. Yeah. So I like it. Yeah, it's something different, and I like it. So I'll always have some kind of octave pedal. Always have some kind of reverb, fuzz box. Yeah. Just because. Who doesn't like fuzz bass?
Maybe a Your Doom at some point.
You know what? I love that pedal, actually. Yeah. I'm really impressed. The wah pedal is great for live. I don't think that would necessarily get recorded. I'm not sure. But that's a really useful thing I use it for filter sweeps more than...
more than your Slash impersonation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so filter, some kind of octave, some kind of fuzz,
Yeah.
and a reverb delay thing. And then is there any like kind of wildcard stuff like ring modulators or?
Yeah, I have
Crazy
that.
stuff.
I have that bit, the bit reducer that I
Yep.
was showing you earlier. That mower, whatever it's called, that tiny little guy. And I mean, I have a ton of stuff at home. Maestro phasers and Space Echo, and like I've got a ton of this, but yeah, for live, this is like, I've kind of committed to about 6 pedals. That Ruiner fuzz by, I think it's Devi Ever, or is it Dwarfcraft? I don't know, it's one of those Devi. That's a pretty glitchy fuzz, and that's sort of fun. But I kind of, I have a couple different neighborhoods that I would go to, and one is just like kind of replace the bass sound with something big and subby, which I would do with either an envelope filter, uses like with the sensitivity turned all the way down.
So you're not even really training it. Yeah.
That or an octave pedal plus that, some kind of dirt, some kind of filter. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty.
And then rig wise, are you Aguilar?
Mm-hmm.
Aguilar
Yeah.
endorser. Aguilar endorsed.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's mainly rigs or pickups or.
I haven't put the pickups in my bass yet, and I want to because I did. I have a pickup that I'm going to put in a bass.
What bass is it? A jazz P bass?
P bass.
P bass, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but I love the big heavy rig. I just don't ever want to be the guy who's got to move it. Yeah. So I've been when I'm lucky on the road, I have the 412 and the 751.
412.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Tens and me. I don't like. Yeah. I don't like tens that much.
When I saw Larry Graham here, he played it in Melbourne a few years ago, and he had I think he had 2 DB750s.
Really?
And he had 4 410s, so he had 2 on stage, and then he had 2 at the front of the stage angled towards him like monitors, like monitor wedges.
Wow.
Can you just imagine? I mean, it's Larry Graham, so you go, cool,
Yeah.
whatever. It
Yeah.
sounded unreal.
I bet.
But it must have been crazy loud on stage.
I can only imagine.
2 750s and 810.
Wow.
Hats off to the guy.
Yeah.
Hey, if you get to that age and you're still doing it, and his show, I don't know if you've ever seen him, but it's just like
I have actually, yeah.
classic entertainment from start to finish.
Yep.
Still dancing and sweating and into the crowd and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like I've been told that Bootsy Collins' approach, at least for a time, was to tell the sound engineer, like, I've got the bass, just mix around me. And he would have like thousands of watts on stage, like multiple rigs and all kinds of... Well, because at one point he had separate rigs for lows, mids, and high, or like different pickups. He had like some craziness going. But the bass was coming from the stage. And the sound engineer would be mixing around that.
Like, it doesn't have enough power to keep up. Because I remember that same video, the All-Star Bass Licks one, Larry Graham's talking about his effects and that, and he's got this original...
Oh, the jet phase.
The Muton and the jet phase for extra added funk.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, man, we should probably wrap it up there.
Cool.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, what a pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time out.
Yeah.
Jonathan Maron, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care and we'll see you next time.
Cool.